Brought that athlete aspect into it, and apparently it is messy that Levon Aronian is wearing as the game in the semi-final has started.
Yep, it's a Queen's Pawn opening. Will we see a transposition to the Queen's Gambit? Now, if White brings the knight out, if Black challenges for the centre with his pawn, it is the Queen's Gambit. And this position, very common. They've had this against each other several times before throughout the tour, which actually included players like Anish Giri. They just weren't watching his games. That's why these players like Magnus, they go back every day and watch all, kind of play through all of the games that happened that day, initiate these sets of trades. OK, White capturing a pawn, but Aronian not recapturing yet, and pawns are starting to disappear. Black now is going to take that white pawn in the centre, the one that has just moved. You can take with a knight as well. OK, he takes with a pawn. You could take with a knight, just putting pressure on White's knight. But I was going to say, if he took with the queen, this would be maybe the most passive approach, offering a queen trade. And due to this pin, the white knight cannot take the black queen. Instead, let's go back to the game. He took with a pawn. But the downside here is that Black has an isolated pawn. It's either a strength or weakness. White brought his bishop out to create a pin, and Black just defended his isolated pawn. And wow, OK, things are heating up because Magnus, he's not even flinching. He's castled to the left side. He's castled long. But look how open this king is right now. And Levon says, OK, I'm going to castle my king too. But compare the kings. Black's king, safe as houses, behind a wall of pawns. Magnus's king, super open.
Why would Magnus go that way? It's super safe the other way.
Because it's all been played before, Kaya.
And the queens are coming off. OK, this is crazy. White's rook now gets to take the black queen, but Black's bishop takes the white queen. And in a fancy way, we have seen a temporary piece sacrifice by Levon Aronian. He's saying, you can take my bishop, but in return, I'm going to get your knight, and everything's going to get simplified here. I'm expecting White's knight actually to move. It has moved, and now this bishop is simply going to retreat. It has to find a safe square. Most likely it goes back, and despite the fact the queens are off, White's king is still a bit open, and everything else is balanced right now. So let's go back to the board. All the trades are happening. Things are getting hoovered off. The players have studied this before this morning. This is clear.
Yes.
And,
wait, so you're saying it's going to be a draw?
Not necessarily, but it's leading to a draw-ish position. So like a level position. So if we fast forward after a few more trades, we see, OK, both sides have strong knights. White still has to catch up in development, piece development, because the bishop and rook are still at home. And that means that Black is happy, despite the fact he's temporarily a pawn down. White has a 3 versus 2 advantage on this side, but that's not relevant at the moment. This looks like the type of thing where Magnus is saying, OK, I'm going to test you. If you know your stuff, then it's just going to be level. If you don't know your stuff, then White has a big advantage. But Aronian, you can see on his clock time, he's actually gained time since the game started. And traditionally, he quite likes these positions, but it's going to be hard to outmaneuver Levon with so few pieces remaining. Create some threats. Because the main thing, OK, White's knight kicked away there and retreating, Black restoring the material balance. But if we look at the pawn structure, White has these 3 versus 2 on the right side, Black has 2 versus 1 on the other flank. That does mean that if all the pieces come off, it will be a pawn race, and it's not clear which side is going to be quicker to create pass pawns. Then they will stand some chances. Meanwhile, Aronian he's got that hoover out. He's saying, OK, we've taken everything off. Let's get the knights off the board as well. The one thing speaking in White's favour.
And is that all because he did castle queenside, long side?
Yeah.
Closer to the centre.
Yeah, 4 square. Suddenly, it's an aggressive king starting to look at some pawns. And, OK, well, we see some trades. And normally when we have such a simplified endgame such as this is quite a significant turn of events because every trade has an impact on the position. And, OK.
Pretty promising in this scenario because this pawn is so weak, so vulnerable. That's why Levon, he couldn't trade off the bishops. It was simply a big mistake. So he brings his king into the action. He's going to try and centralise his king if possible. Also trying to defend this weakness.
But the white king now will start marching.
Yeah, White's king is marching and it's going to try and destabilise this black rook. And, OK, a few moves, the black pawn pushing forward, but suddenly it's a bit shaky for Black. Black's rook forced to step back to defend the pawn next to it. And I still don't see a breakthrough for White, but White is definitely the one in charge. For example, OK, he fixes the structure, fixing this pawn on a light square so that later on it can be a target for White's bishop.
Very sophisticated move there. I like it. Fixing those long-term weaknesses. Good endgame strategy.
I think, OK, Black's reduced to a just kind of wait-and-see strategy. Black is just going to maybe move the rook back and forth. But meanwhile, White still lacks pawn breaks. White can't break through on the left side of the board because this is where Black has the strengths. And meanwhile, it does feel like you have to, at some point, start pushing forward on the side White is stronger. That's the only way to make progress long-term that I see. Meanwhile, Magnus just waiting with his bishop there. And, OK, I expect to see Levon Aronian do the same. And no, OK, the bishop goes back.
Levon, I
changes.
think, is going to be inviting Magnus to repeat the position 3 times.
A draw here is great for Levon, right?
Right.
Yep.
OK, Magnus says no. Let's play. And instead he improves the placing of his rook, moving it to the 5th row, eyeing up that weak pawn on f5.
White doesn't attack it yet, just kind of yo-yoing back and forth with the bishop.
He just passes. Levon's passing with his bishop. It's like, OK, let's wait. Just said, oh.
Is that an Irish flag?
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it Irish?
I think so.
Yeah, it is. That's playing some Chopin pieces while waiting for David, Ivanka and Kaya on the chess show makes me happy. And still, the bishops are dancing merrily away.
White's only... OK, he brings his rook across. No threat still. Just nice and pretty. And Aronian says, OK, I'm going to challenge your rook. You don't necessarily want that.
Oh.
OK, he does trade. It's still fine, but I think this is a bit risky.
I was surprised, actually. I thought that maybe the trade might happen, but in a different way. OK, so the king now moves over sharply to the left and is guarding those critical squares. But I mean, just looking at it objectively, there's no entry points for the black king.
Yeah. I guess the black king is tied down to the pawn, that f5 pawn, and maybe Magnus has some ambitious intentions. Maybe he's going to try and bring his bishop to the side, challenge black's bishop. No, he doesn't do that. The white king, the problem is it can't step forward. It's controlled by the black bishop and black pawns. And if you can't step forward, no way through for the white king, no way through for the black king either.
That Magnus Carlsen can just squeeze magic out of nothing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is he trying for that here, or is it?
Yeah, but this is a different type of nothing position because, I mean, just take a look at it. I mean, none of the kings can actually penetrate into the position, especially after Levon's last move. And this makes the position relatively simple. And the players are repeating moves. I think we are going to see a draw.
With the bishops.
I know.
Yeah, there we go. It is a draw. The position repeating itself 3 times. No way through. And good start for Levon Aronian.
Yeah. Levon, messy. A good start with the black pieces, a draw in the first game.